She didn't cheat with her body. She drifted with her heart. And you felt it. Not in one big moment, but in the way her eyes stopped searching for yours. In the silence between dinner conversations. In the softness she gave someone else. The softness you used to call home. This video isn't about blame. It's about seeing the slow unraveling before it breaks you quietly. Part 1. The emotional vacancy. When familiarity replaces feeling. No woman plans to grow distant. No man sets out to be ignored. But somewhere along the path of shared responsibilities, quiet routines, and muted dinners, something shifts. What once felt electric now feels expected. What once held wonder now just holds weight. In the early days of marriage, love is loud. Every glance carries meaning. Every conversation feels like a revelation. There's intimacy in the mundane folding laundry together, brushing teeth side by side, staying up too late just to hear each other breathe. But then slowly the tone changes. The conversations become logistical. Did you pay the bill? Can you pick up milk? What time is the parent-teacher meeting? And beneath that surface exchange, a quiet ache begins. Not of betrayal, not yet, but of emotional vacancy when presence still exists, but feeling has quietly left the room. Dr. John Gottman, a leading voice in relationship psychology, once said, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference." And indifference doesn't scream. It whispers. It shows up when your touch becomes routine, when your voice no longer triggers curiosity, when your effort is assumed instead of appreciated. For many married women, this emotional drought isn't about lacking love. It's about lacking recognition. Not the grand kind, no diamond ring or dramatic gestures, but the small, daily kind. The way her husband used to look up when she entered the room. The way he used to listen without a phone in his hand. The way he used to make her feel like the most interesting person in the world, even if she was just talking about her day. And when that disappears, something dangerous replaces it. Emptiness that longs to be filled. Maybe it starts with a simple compliment from someone else. "You look radiant today." A phrase she hasn't heard in years. Maybe it's a man at work who actually listens, who notices her new haircut, who asks questions that aren't about dinner plans or school pickups. And suddenly, that tiny moment of attention feels like oxygen after years of subtle suffocation. This is where the slow erosion begins, not with bad intentions, but with unmet emotional needs. Because no matter how stable a marriage is, it cannot survive if one partner begins to feel invisible. You can be loyal. You can be faithful. And still be fading from someone's heart simply because you stopped showing up where it mattered most, in their emotional world. And once that void is felt, once the thrill of being noticed awakens, something she thought was lost, it becomes harder and harder to ignore. Not because she's bad, but because she's human. And human beings don't just want connection. They need to feel chosen again and again and again. Let's keep going, because the most dangerous part isn't the feeling. It's what happens when the mind starts making sense of it. Part 2. The mind's escape route, how she starts making it make sense. No one wakes up and says, "Today is the day I betray everything I once believed in." But the truth is, we rarely fall in one leap. We drift. For the woman who once swore she'd never cross a line, the first step isn't a lie. It's a thought. And the mind, desperate to avoid discomfort, gives that thought a soft place to land. "I'm not doing anything wrong. We're just talking. He's just a friend. I enjoy the conversation, that's all." This is the escape route. not out of the marriage, but out of guilt. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance, the tension that rises when our actions don't align with our values. And most people aren't wired to sit with that tension for long. So instead of changing the action, they change the story. The brain, clever and quiet, begins rewriting the narrative. I deserve this moment. I've been ignored for years. If my husband cared, I wouldn't even need this. This doesn't affect my marriage. It's separate. And with each new line of internal dialogue, the distance between who she was and what she's becoming shrinks. But here's the dangerous part. The most convincing lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Richard Feynman once said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." She's not planning an affair. She's soothing an ache for attention, for presence, for something that reminds her she still matters. So the first message that lingers longer than it should doesn't feel like cheating. The compliment that lights her up again just feels like fresh air. The late-night talk with someone who actually listens feels more like therapy than temptation. And so she keeps walking, not toward betrayal, but toward relief, until one day, the distance becomes too far to ignore. Not because of what she did, but because of how she now thinks. She no longer questions the boundary. She questions the marriage. And here lies the core shift. She stops asking, "Is this wrong?" and starts asking, "Why should I deny myself this?" What once required justification now feels like self-respect. The mind, clever and tired, has flipped the script. She's not betraying. She's surviving. She's not hiding. She's healing. At least, that's what the story now says. But feelings don't erase facts. And the more we bend the truth inward, the more our actions begin bending outward. Because what starts in the mind never stays there. Up next, the line gets crossed. Not in one big moment, but in a slow, quiet unraveling. Part 3, where the line fades and the first step becomes the fall. It never feels like a fall when it begins. The first message she shouldn't send doesn't come with guilt. It comes with a thrill. The first time she meets him, just as friends, doesn't feel dangerous. It feels harmless, familiar, human. But this is where the line begins to fade. Not erased all at once, but smudged by repetition. There's a saying in behavioral psychology: the chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they're too strong to be broken. And in the context of emotional betrayal, this couldn't be more true. The first time she feels his hand linger just a moment longer and she doesn't pull away, that's the beginning. Not of an affair, but of a new narrative. One where this connection starts to feel more real than the one she promised to protect. And what makes this stage terrifying is that most people don't even recognize when it's happening, because it doesn't announce itself. There's no siren, no alarm, just a slow unraveling of moral fabric. At first, she hides one message, then deletes a thread, then lies about where she's going. Not because she's committed a crime, but because she's chasing a feeling she doesn't want questioned. And here's the hard truth. Once something feels good, we will do almost anything to keep it, even if it costs us the truth. Neuroscientists have found that romantic and sexual attraction light up the same brain centers as cocaine. The dopamine, the thrill, the anticipation. It becomes addictive not to the man, but to how she feels around him. And when the emotions run deep enough, the mind creates a new kind of logic. If it feels this good, how can it be wrong? This is when betrayal stops looking like betrayal and starts looking like freedom. She tells herself she can stop anytime, but she doesn't. Not because she's reckless, but because she's already invested in the lie. And by now, the lie doesn't sound like a lie anymore. It sounds like the only thing that still feels alive. In the beginning, she felt guilty. Now, she feels careful, strategic, better at covering her tracks, better at compartmentalizing. So much so that even her own heart has stopped ringing alarm bells. But here's the moment of no return. When she stops seeing her marriage as her primary relationship and starts seeing her husband as the other man, the real intimacy, the real vulnerability, the real her it's been given away. And even if she hasn't crossed the line physically, emotionally, she's already gone. What started with "it's just talking" has become something she can't imagine losing, even if it means burning the very foundation she once swore to protect. But why does she keep going, even when she knows it's wrong? That's where the most dangerous illusion begins. And it's the next part of this unraveling. Part 4, the fantasy filter, why he never stood a chance against her imagination. Sometimes, the most painful betrayal isn't another man. It's the version of you that lives in her mind, the one she silently edits, compares, rewrites. Not because you failed, but because her imagination offered something even you, in your full sincerity, could never compete with. You see, reality is limited. Even at your best, you're still human, flawed, tired, imperfect. But fantasy? It's flawless. It listens perfectly, speaks only when desired, and always makes her feel seen, admired, and safe, without ever asking for anything in return. This is the trap most good men never see coming. They show up consistently. They work hard. They stay loyal. But loyalty doesn't spark adrenaline. Stability doesn't fuel dreams. And routine, even when it's loving, doesn't compete with novelty crafted by the mind. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Imagination doesn't need to be real to be powerful. It just needs to feel better than what is. And when a woman begins emotionally detaching, she doesn't always run to another man. She runs inward, into the arms of a mental narrative that tells her, you could feel alive again if you just stopped settling. And that's when the filter forms. Now, everything you do gets compared not to reality, but to what she wishes reality felt like. You bring her flowers, and she smiles. But deep down she thinks, he only does this on special occasions. Another man smiles at her across the room, and she thinks, I bet he'd notice without needing a reason. You sit beside her at dinner, tired from the day. She scrolls through messages, heart beating faster at a notification not from you, and it feels like escape. But what she doesn't realize is that this escape isn't about a better man. It's about a better version of herself. The version she felt when someone made her the center of attention again. She's not chasing him. She's chasing how she feels when he looks at her. Chasing the thrill, the spark, the validation she hasn't felt at home in years. And that makes the real you, the steady you, start to feel dull in comparison. Not because you are, but because you're real. And real can't compete with the fantasy we've been feeding in silence. That's why some women leave good men, not for someone better, but for something imagined, something romanticized, something that never argued, never failed, never forgot. So what do? You don't compete with her fantasy. You hold your ground in reality. Because in the long run, fantasy always collapses under truth. But that only matters if she's still willing to see you clearly. And if she's not, then it's not your fault she left. It's her illusion that took her away. Coming up next, what happens when that illusion becomes everything she believes in, and she no longer sees a way back? Let's keep going. Part 5. The silent exit when a good man lets go without a fight. There comes a moment when a man stops explaining. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he knows no words can compete with what she's already decided to feel. She's gone, not physically perhaps, but emotionally. He can feel it in the way she looks past him, in the quiet withdrawals, in the unspoken comparisons he was never supposed to notice. And for a while, he tries. He leans in. He softens his voice. He asks more questions, hoping she'll open up, but the silence he receives in return speaks louder than any answer. Because by now, it's not just about him. It's about the fantasy she's been feeding. The version of love that lives in her head. The one he can't live up to, not because he's wrong, but because he's real. And so, one day, he doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't beg for clarity. He doesn't try to compete. He simply lets go. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with a kind of quiet dignity that only men who've known what it feels like to be unseen can carry. This is the silent exit. The kind that doesn't leave slammed doors or broken plates, just a folded note of presence that once was. Because he understands now, love that needs to be chased isn't love. And a woman who's already made room in her heart for someone else's gaze has already left, whether she admits it or not. So he walks away. Not because he's weak, but because he's strong enough not to fight for someone who's fighting to feel something elsewhere. He walks away with the knowledge that he gave what he could. And sometimes, that has to be enough. Because men like him don't stay where they're tolerated. They stay where they're chosen. Where their presence means more than just reliability. Where their effort is seen, not just expected. And when that place no longer exists, they don't make noise. They disappear like the last good thing she didn't know how to keep. But even in walking away, he's not angry. He's free. And that freedom doesn't come from forgetting her, but from remembering himself. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a man can say is nothing at all. Up next, we'll bring it all home. With one final truth, and one challenge, to reclaim your presence. Let's close this out together. Final reflections, and your 7-day presence recovery challenge. Some men don't lose their partner. They lose themselves trying to be enough for someone who stopped choosing them. But there's a version of you she forgot to see. The one who shows up with presence, not noise. With clarity, not chaos. You were never meant to compete with fantasy. You were meant to embody reality so grounded, so still, that no illusion could ever shake it. So here's your challenge: not to win her back, but to reclaim the gravity she took for granted. For the next 7 days, return to yourself. Sit in silence without needing a distraction. Write what you were never allowed to say. Look yourself in the mirror and actually see the man staring back. Move your body like it remembers who it is. Observe without reacting. Clear out what doesn't respect your space. And recommit to the principles that define the man you are when no one's watching. Not because it'll bring her back, but because you're not here to chase what chose to leave. You're here to rebuild what should have never been forgotten. You. If this message reached something quiet inside you, if it helped you see more clearly, breathe more deeply, or stand a little taller, consider joining us on this journey. Like the video, subscribe to Petals of Stoicism, and share this with someone who's walking through silence too. Not for the numbers, but because every man deserves to feel less alone and more awake. This is Petals of Stoicism. Until next time, walk with stillness, lead with clarity, and never apologize for being the man she underestimated.